I think actually the history even goes a little bit further because I think you remember playing with us like My Darkest Days, like probably 15 years ago, maybe more, you know?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up in a little bit, but the biggest show that my band ever played was opening for My Darkest Days, who was opening for Default at the X
Yeah.
in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And it's so wild to, we're going to talk about My Darkest Days, but to, meet you guys at that show. And,
Mhm.
Default was the headliner. People were there for Default, but I met you guys and it's like, oh, these guys are awesome. They're nice guys. And then a few
Mhm.
years later, I remember saying, oh, that's crazy. They just signed with 604 Records. And then
Yeah.
Porn Star Dancing comes out, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a great song. Like, that sounds like a hit. And then the song goes to number one. And then there's the music video. And I'm like, oh man, Chad Kroger from Nickelback is in the video. And then, oh man, Zach
Yeah.
Wild, Black Label Society and Ozzy Osbourne is in the video. And then, oh, Ludacris. And I'm like, man, these
Yeah.
guys have made it. Like, I don't know how many more points you need to know that a band has made it than all the things I just named in a row for My Darkest Day.
Yeah. It was crazy. It was really crazy. We can go into that a little bit if you want, how that came together. Um, we, I kind of joined the band halfway through making their first album. Um, and Chad was producing it with Joy Moy, and the band needed I think one more song for the record. And Matt was writing with a guy named Ted Bruner, who's like a writer for Katy Perry and a bunch of other very established musicians. They put together Porn Star Dancing, and it's interesting because I think that song completely just changed the trajectory completely of what the band was going to be. Ended up being very cool, but what's crazy about that whole thing was I remember when we had the first version of the song and we find out Chad's going to be on it. And we're like, oh my God, that's so cool. He identified, I think, too, that's going to be a single. He's like, I'll lend my vocals on it. And then Chad had apparently met up with Zach Wild somewhere and showed Zach the song. And he's like, hey, would you want to play on this with the guys? And Zach was like, he was in. And then through, being, I guess, signed to Def Jam and Ludacris is on that label. Ludacris got, a hold of the song, and then Ludacris wanted to be on the song. But you have to imagine at the time that all of this is happening, we are all rehearsing in a basement in Pickering, Ontario. All the other guys lived at that house. I was living downtown at the time, so I would commute there to just rehearse every day. And we're just getting all of this information, and we're thinking like, this is going to be huge. And even just kind of like being like an independent, no, actually, time we weren't independent because we were signed to Def Jam, but nothing had happened yet. We just knew like, how can this not do something? And then we find out that we're going to be making this huge budget music video. We go to Las Vegas to shoot it from our rehearsal space, pretty much in Pickering, Ontario. And now, Def Jam has rented out the entire top floor of the Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas. There's freaking helicopters everywhere. There's like 70 strippers that they got at Spearmint Rhino. I think they were actually at one point, I don't know if this was a joke, but somebody from Def Jam was saying this might be a Guinness Book of Record for the most strippers ever in a music video. And then you just see like Ludacris walk in and Zach Wild, Chad's there. And it was so surreal because, again, at this point, we had done really nothing. And it was just that feeling of like, holy shit, this is going to be big. And then we kind of go back to Pickering, Ontario, can continue rehearsing. And then we just start seeing this song start climbing the charts in America. But we're at our rehearsal space in Pickering, Ontario. Our manager's calling us like, it's on the charts now. And we're like, what? It's getting radio play in America? That's crazy. And then it just, honestly, it took off from there. We got our first opening tour spot. It was opening up for Sick Puppies. We were first of four opening up for Sick Puppies on that US tour. And I think we were getting paid $500 a night on that tour. And that had to cover like band, crew, gas. We were living essentially in the van. The van had a hole in it, so rocks would shoot up at you as you were sitting in it. And that video got so big, and the song just went to number one as we were first of four opening for Sick Puppies. So you could start seeing from the beginning of the tour, we had no draw at all. And then you could see by like midway through the tour, like people were coming out to see My Darkest Days and singing the song. And that was, again, crazy surreal. And I remember there was one night, me, Matt, and the drummer for Sick Puppies, We it was like late night after show. We were at like a Waffle House, and he was just like, dude, that song is going to be the biggest song in the country this year. It's going to go number one. And Matt and I were like, oh, thanks, man. I don't know. And sure as shit, he was right. It did, and that was pretty much it. It just exploded.
It's funny you say, obviously it's a big budget music video. I think even if everything wasn't big budget, it would be big budget just having to pay all those strippers as extras. Like if you're just paying them a few
Yeah,
$1,000s
yeah,
each, right
yeah,
away you have a big budget music video, even if it looked terrible, if there wasn't a good location, if there wasn't
yeah.
all the guest artists in it.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Like this was like 2009, I think that we made the video, or 2010. Like there wasn't drones. Like that was all helicopters. So we were just like, I remember sitting there being like, how much did this cost? Like, it's insane. It was ridiculous. But it was super cool.
Man, I have so much to say about Porn Star Dancing, so I'll just give a little bit of the
Go for it.
accolades about it.
Yeah.
So it spent 2 weeks at number one on the Billboard mainstream rock charts in the US. It was a top 10 hit on Billboard's rock song charts. It was top three on the rock charts in Canada. The song and music video combined on Spotify and YouTube have over 320 million plays.
Mhm.
Why do you think people love that song so much? And how do you even try to grasp the concept of numbers that big?
I mean, I think so many things lined up with that song, honestly. So you have obviously the song was a hit, but then you had the music video, which had like, people who were like Ludacris fans were now hearing this rock band. And then people who were like Black Label Society fans probably weren't a huge fan of it, like they're diehard, but Zach was on it. It brought a lot of all these different groups. Like I was trying to think, like, when's the last time that's kind of really happened? It's like Aerosmith, Run DMC, there
You're
was
saying where music video is actually kind of leading the way.
with the song as well, but it was like we mixed a bunch of different artists from different genres together. Like when would you ever see Ludacris on a rock song? I don't think it's ever happened, probably won't happen again. And it was just crazy. Like you're listening to like all these other bands on the rock charts that's like heavy rock, but then like you got Ludacris on a song with us. But I think we were also the right band for that song at that time. We were just young and wild and crazy, and we were known as a crazy band. Like everyone who ever toured with our band, they're just like, man, that you guys partied harder than any band we've ever toured with. So I think it was authentic at that time, for us. And I also just think, it it was one of those things that like we would start playing that, and even even a grandmother would just be like start feeling slutty for some reason, like just like I don't know, it just brought that out in all these girls, and girls would just go wild. People you would never think, like school teachers and stuff, as soon as we started playing that song, it just everyone would let go. I don't know, it had the magic juice, magic sauce. It's one of those things that your whole life you try and figure out how to, I guess, be a part of something like that, but it just happened. And I just think we were the right guys for the song. Like I think if it was another band that had that song at the time, I don't know if they would have been able to pull it off. It was just authentic for us at that time. So I think that was a huge part of it. And we were a lot of fun. Like we always had these crazy tours on our bus. So I think very quickly, once people started like, even within the music industry, hanging around us before and after show, they were like, that is this band. And I think there was a certain authenticity that came with it that made it more real, and people wanted to be around it. And that's one of the things I noticed about our band. Like everybody wanted to be around us. I don't know, people just wanted to experience being around these crazy bunch of dudes. So I think that had a lot. There was like some folklore, I think, that also went along with the music as well. And then also, you have Def Jam behind you, which is what bands at that time were getting signed to a label like that. So there was just so much push in so many different ways. Yeah, it was pretty epic.
So was it 604 Records in Canada and then Def Jam Mercury in the US?
Yes, and then Spine Farm Universal in Europe. So all under the Universal umbrella, but Def Jam was the one that like essentially provided the budget and a lot of the major push for the band. Like, you know, there's a lot of resources that a label like that has, and they use them all to like make sure that we were successful. And it was an amazing experience. Like L.A. Reid, um, uh, like, you know, from the Babyface. Um, he was the one who signed us with David Massey. David Massey had signed Oasis. So it was like this pedigree of people that were also behind it, that believed in it. That I think that alone, when people just heard like L.A. Reid and David Massey signed this band from Toronto, people took it seriously.
Do you think that you guys were known as this fun band, this party band? Do you think that the image created by the Porn Star Dancing music video, it created this thing that you had to live up to as well? Like, you were young and liked to have fun, but do you feel like there was also this other thing now that had been created that you had to be congruent with the image of that video?
I think the band was like that um, before the song, but I think the song took it to a whole other level. You know, now you're like surrounded by. That's the other thing too. So like the song became so big, it's like now all these famous porn stars wanting to hang around the band. All these like, you know, every time we pull into like a city or our tour schedule, we would have like strip clubs being like, "Can you guys make an appearance at our strip club?" You know, and you know we get picked up in a limo and taken to like the biggest strip club in town, and just to hang out. And I just think it perpetuated it and just made it bigger. But I don't know if I don't want to speak for the other guys, but I found for myself personally, it became one of those things where I wanted to personally evolve, and it became very hard to evolve out of that. Like, how do you be the band that, you know, has porn star dancing, and how do you evolve from that? I think that was like that was a hard thing. And because I personally would have loved the band. The band has so many other great songs that I think were better songs, more timeless in a different way than Porn Star Dancing. I think Porn Star Dancing is going to be timeless, like a Mambo Number Five type timeless, where it's just like people hear that song and know that song kind of thing. But there were other songs on those albums that I think were like timeless in a way where you would want to show those to your grandkids type songs. And I think the success of Porn Star Dancing kind of overshadowed some of that. So so yeah, but it was definitely, I think there was a struggle at some point to be like, okay, like we have to be these guys now because this is what people expect, you know? And you could feel it like when people are around you, like, okay, what are you guys gonna do now? And it's just like, well, I'm tired, you know, but you know, you just kind of feel like that pressure to just be that person. That burns you out in a different way.
So I've heard that the most popular song at strip clubs over the years is Closer from Nine Inch Nails because
Yes.
it's such a has such a good groove and a dark groove, and the lyrics are very sexual and dirty. So that's like all time the number one strip club song. Man, Porn Star
Yep.
Dancing since then has to be up there as well. I don't know if there's charts that tell you, you know, hey, we're charting at strip clubs or something, but have you heard that?
I have heard at one point, I don't know if it's now still, but at one point, I don't remember who it was that told me this. It might have been somebody at the label, but they were just like, it's the most played song in strip clubs right now. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But funny enough, I have a buddy who I just recently found out. He's somebody who actually works for me. And he was just like, he's just like, you know, my wife is actually a stripper, and he's like, and she dances to your song all the time. And he's like, I think it's actually pretty cool because I'm just like, I know that guy, you know. So it still happens, you know. And anytime like I'll meet somebody, you know, from that world, they're like, you know, I dance to that song all the time, or it's my favorite song. So yeah,
It gets the
pretty
people
crazy.
going.
It gets the people going. It's just like that's what I was saying. Like the second we would play that, you know, the roof would just explode wherever we were playing. And backtrack a little bit, you know, like saying we had this massive music video, and we were on that Sick Puppies tour, like I said, making $500 a night. And I remember vividly pulling into a show at Scout Bar in Houston, Texas, and there being this huge lineup around the venue, and it was for us because it was a headline show. I think it was one of our first maybe headline shows, and I remember just seeing this, holy shit, like these people are actually here for us. We started seeing it, midway through the Sick Puppies tour, but then this is like people are here for us. And I remember pulling in with our jalopy van and people being like, we roll out of that thing just like looking all crazy because we've been living in a van, and people being like, you guys aren't in a private jet. Like we saw the music video. You guys look like you just be like rolling out in like multiple buses and jets, but nothing had, monetized yet. It was so fresh. So it was funny. So yeah, man, it was a ride. I'll tell you that much for sure.
There are so many misconceptions about musicians in the music industry, and that's one of them. I just interviewed Simple Plan, and they were telling me that they had just sold 4 million copies of their debut album, and they were broke and
Yeah.
they were worried. Like it takes years for the royalties and to
Yeah.
pay off the initial
Yeah.
loan from the record label. So these guys are 4 million sold, biggest band on the planet, and they
Yeah.
had side hustles to pay rent.
It takes time for it all to catch up. And I remember too, like when it took off, like people from high school asking for all kinds of weird stuff. There was this bully from high school. Funny enough, he used to beat up everybody in the school. He was the leader of a Korean gang of the school that I went to, and this guy would beat the shit out of everybody and just rob them. The teachers were scared of him. Everybody was scared of this guy, and I was lucky. The very first day of high school, everyone had told me about this guy coming in. I get on a bus, and I get on a bus, and I see him get on the same bus as me, and I'm like, holy shit, it's so and so. He's just gonna. He was older too. I think at that time he was already in 12th grade or 13th at the time, and I think he had also stayed back a couple. He was older. He was probably like 18. I was like a kid. I'm like, oh man, there he is. Like he's just gonna beat the shit out of me when I get out of this bus. It turns out that I get out of the bus at my stop, and he gets off at the same stop. I'm like, it's gonna go down now. And he comes up to me. He's like, you live in this neighborhood? I'm like, yeah. He's like, me too. You're safe from now on. So I never got it, but I would walk down the street with my friends, at school, and he would beat the shit out of all of my friends and just be like, high five me. He'd be like, you're cool. We live in the same neighborhood. Anyways, long story short, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when My Darkest Days took off, I get a message one day in my DMs on Facebook, and I put it up, and it's this guy, and he's like, I need bail money. And he's like, I know you're rich now. He's just like, can you pony up some cash because I need to get, I'm gonna need some bail money soon or something like that. So it was funny, people reaching out for all kinds of random stuff. I'm like, dude, we're living in a van right now, dude. Like, we're not there yet.
So I just have a couple more questions about porn star dancing, and then we're going
Sure.
to take it all the way back to the beginning of your music career. So the single Porn Star Dancing goes gold in the US. It goes 3 times platinum in Canada. Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
receiving the news that the song had gone gold and then platinum and then multi-platinum?
I remember when I remember when the song went number one. I think that was a way bigger moment than it going gold. I remember when it went gold and platinum. It was like a very like, oh, by the way, it's gone platinum and gold now, and we're gonna send you your plaques. Which, by the way, we had to buy our plaques. Which I was just like, what? Like we just had we gold and platinum records. So that's another thing. That wasn't even gifted by the record labels. We had to physically buy them. And I was like, I almost didn't want to buy it. I'm like, that's insane. But I was just like, I'll regret it. Not one day not having that plaque on my wall. But I'm like, come on, you're not going to give us our plaques. We have to fucking buy them. But I remember when the song went number one, we had this pit bull of a radio guy that worked at Def Jam. His name was David McGilvray. I fucking love. Can I swear, by the way?
Sure.
Okay. It'll come out at some point. I'm really resisting. So we had this pitbull of a radio guy named David McGilvray, and this guy was he was a fighter, man. Like he would just not let anyone say no, and everyone had to play that song. He was that guy, the guy that like, the unsung hero almost in a way that no one knows the name. This is his name. His name's David McGilvray, and I remember there was a night. He came out to see us. I want to say we were playing in Minneapolis, I believe. And David came out. He's just like, the song is going to go number one tonight. And I remember it was, I think it was after the show, if I recall correctly, he's like, it's number one. And I remember that being like, oh my God, like, there's been a lot of bands that have had hits and big songs, but to like have your first song be the number one song in America, in the country that everybody wants to be number one in. I remember just thinking in that moment, it's just like at that point in time, we were the number one at something in the country that everyone wants to be number one in, whether you're a professional athlete or, whatever it is. And I think that was the moment that actually struck me the most. And I still think about that sometimes too. When I think about that, or my wife will point it out. I'll be like, he's like the best. He's the best basketball player or whatever. She's like, you guys were number one at some point too. And I think about that kind of stuff, or like she'll point out like, don't kind of degrade, what you did as well. You were there, you did something like that too, So I think that moment is something that like struck me then. And it still is something I think about now.
How did you find out that they were looking for a guitarist?
That's a good question. So talking about networking, as you were earlier, I was always the person in any of my bands that was the networker. I saw the value. I'm an entrepreneur as well, we'll talk about that later because I actually have some advice for up and coming musicians regarding this kind of thing. But I was able to separate the creative and the business of music. And everyone else I was always in bands with, they were always stumbled and stifled by the business stuff. And I saw the value in being able to like hone in and market and that kind of stuff and network. So very early on in high school, I knew all the major players I could tell you every single agent at the agency group in Toronto. I could tell you how long almost they had been there. I could tell you every agent at Feldman. I knew who they were. I knew where they came from. I knew what venues they would go to. I was just like, music CIA. I was like, I just knew, I spied around. And I would always, like I said, growing up in the city, every independent band trying to make it, will come to Toronto to like showcase and play. So it's very easy to keep your ear to the ground when you live in a major city like that and you're tapped into the scene. And I played a show with My Darkest Days very early on, the like original lineup of the band before Paulo. This is when Brendan's brother was the guitar player. And I remember seeing them play, and they were so much better than my band. And those guys, I believe Matt is like 6 or 7 years older than me. Because I remember when I joined the band, I think I was 20. And I think Matt was 26 or 27. So at this point, when I saw them, I might have been like 17. And they were already in their, well into their 20s. So they had a lot more experience. And I remember seeing them. And I remember that night I opened for them being like, I'm going to play in that band. And I just kind of made it a point of going to their shows. And I remember when my band started to kind of a couple years down, my band started to get like a little bit of a following, independent following. Then it was like, it made sense to bring all our bands together. So My Darkest Days would say, hey, we're having a show. Do you guys want to be the support on this show? Sure. And kind of to bring things full circle, fast forward, here we are a couple years later, and I'm actually where I am right now in this exact spot. Because I said before I owned this place, this kind of our beach house here, I used to rent this place with my family. And it was always a goal for me to buy this place. And because we had a family friend who owned here. And I was sitting in here with my family. It looked much different in here at the time. And I remember having my laptop and I get like a DM. And it's from Doug, the drummer for My Darkest Days. He's like, hey, man, we're thinking of having another guitar player in the band, and we want you to come out and audition. So they were auditioning lead guitar players. Paulo was in the band at the time. Paulo was fantastic. I was like, yeah, sure. So I come out, I learn a bunch of the songs that they had at the time. And I think that they liked that I was much younger than them at the time. Paulo was much older than even Matt and Doug. And Doug and Matt, I think, like I said, they were older than me. And I think they wanted, they were at the time where the deal with Island Def Jam hadn't come through just yet, and they were going to be doing more showcases. And I think they kind of wanted to bring somebody like new in, and that was more of the lead guitar player. And so my first ever show with the band was a showcase for Def Jam Records. So that was like mind-blowingly
No
like
pressure.
no pressure.
Yeah, just
And
a
I thought
band's entire career rides on this
just yeah,
first gig.
just a band's yeah, exactly. Just a band's entire career pretty much hinged on this. But it also showed to me that they believed in me and what I was doing at the time. And I remember that first show was packed. We packed that Alma combo. Everybody in the music industry is there. And then right before our show, I see Ian Thornley walk in from Big Rack. I see Chad Kroger walk into the Alma combo. I I want to say some of the guys from Billy Talent were there too. And again, this independent band, I've never done anything like this before, playing for, major label. Uh, and that was kind of it. The deal ended up coming through shortly after that, but that's pretty much how it happened. It was just networking, being around the scene all the time, knowing the right people, networking with the right people, and eventually, you know, luck, talent, and timing kind of all intersect, right? And that's pretty much how it happened.
So I was surprised when I saw that Paulo Neto was in My Darkest Days because I
Yeah,
know him from Thornley, I know him
sure.
from Big Wreck, and then to
Yeah,
see that he's in a third epic Canadian rock band is like, what band hasn't this
yeah.
guy been in?
Paulo's amazing, by the way, man. He's so talented. I just don't think My Darkest Days was a good fit for him. Um, as a musician, you can make things work and you can kind of make yourself fit into certain situations. But I think Paulo was at the point in his life where he was looking for something different and he was a way better fit for other things. But I will tell you that had nothing to do with his level of talent because he's wildly talented person. Um, and I remember like Paulo at the time, like I said, I was 20 and I think Paulo was like 31 or something like that. So he was 11 years older than me. And I remember when they're like, listen, Paulo's leaving the band and we're not going to add another guitar player. So it's just going to be you now. And I had to pick up all of his vocal parts and his rhythm playing parts. And I had to adjust to that because that was not my style of playing. And I had never been a harmony singer before. So it was like a grind to kind of like, learn what he was doing, plus what they would originally hired me to do or originally brought me in the band to do. So I remember being like, oh man, this is gonna be tough. And it was, but I'm so grateful for it because I learned a bunch of new skills I would have probably not have if I wasn't thrown into the fire.
So we have a comment sent in from a fan. This is from Judy Corbin. Judy says, I can't think of any questions, but it was a really good time at all the shows I made it to. My Darkest Days is easily the band I saw the most live shows of. 3 Days Grace comes in second. Much love from Judy. So just a
Awesome.
comment.
Love that. That's awesome. Yeah, we had definitely had like fans that were super hardcore that would follow us. We had this group called the MDD Addicts. They had shirts and everything. And I'm like, I remember thinking like, how do these people do it? Like they don't have jobs. Like they're just at every single show across America. And I thought that was so cool. So yeah, we had people like that. I love that. It's awesome.
So in 2010, you guys released the debut self-titled album, My Darkest Days. There's three singles, Porn Star Dancing, Move Your Body, and Every Lie. The album goes to number 3 on the Billboard Hard Rock Albums charts in the US, goes to number 11 on the Canadian album charts. So I own this album and I remember playing it all the time. Those three
Mm-hmm.
singles to me all sounded like hit singles if I've ever heard any before. I thought the
Yeah.
album sounded so well recorded and so polished. It sounded
Mm-hmm.
like I was hearing what rock music would sound like in the future. So it sounded
Yeah.
current, but it also had kind of a future element to it because of the polish and the ear candy and some of the electronic stuff that was in there as well.
Yeah.
What do you think came together to make the album just sound so great?
I think Joey Moe was a huge part of that as well. And also, Matt was not a guitar, really a guitar player. He was the Matt comes from everything as a songwriter. I do too, but I was also, in fact, I love the guitar. Whereas Matt saw the guitar as just a tool. So if you actually look at a lot of the stuff on the record, it's like guitar parts that are simple that almost sound like they're synth parts in a way. And I think that was a huge part of that kind of futuristic sound was the fact that Matt was playing guitar as not really a guitar player. And it's like my daughter the other day, she was in her bedroom and she's like, man, she's an incredible little songwriter. She's 9 years old. She'll sit for hours writing music. And she's self-taught. She's kind of like me where she has to seek out direction on her own timing, but she's not like, I gave her a guitar and she will just fiddle around with it on her own. And the other day, she actually came up with a riff, like as a non-guitar player. And I'm just watching her, how she's like clumping through this riff, but it was so sick that I was just like, can I borrow that? Like I took out my guitar and I like refined it just a little bit. And I actually sent it to Lucas. And I was like, let's listen to this riff. I was like, we got to use this. Like, give Willow some writing credits on this one. But I think that's where Matt came from. And I think then Joey Moe was really good at kind of, create like, polishing the sound. Because if you listen to My Darkest Days, pre-Joey Moe, pre-Chad, it was a lot more grungy. And I think Joey was able to kind of refine it a little bit and give it more of a futuristic type vibe.
Your daughter wrote like the next Papa Roach Last Resort type guitar riff.
Man, yeah, like she's so cool. I'm like, I wish I was as cool as you when you were a kid. Well, she's got like amazing style too. I'll give you like a quick little sidebar. This is a funny story that I just love. She like loves to perform, and last year or the year before, do you know who Desmond Child is at all?
Yep.
Yeah, he's like probably I don't know. I would say he's probably the biggest songwriter of the last maybe 100 years. Like he's written every single hit, Living on a Prayer.
A lot of like pop and R&B hits, right?
Pop, art, rock. He wrote pretty much Kiss's hits, Bon Jovi, Katy Perry. He's a massive songwriter. Look him up. He's written pretty much everything you can imagine. And we went to his Christmas party at his, he has a place, this ridiculous place overlooking Central Park in Manhattan. And we got invited to his Christmas party. We went to it, and it's just like all these music industry people. And there's his huge grand piano there that he's written all these mega hits on. And there's this kind of, there's a piano there playing away. And my daughter, Willow, she's just like, I want to go sing. And I'm like, go for it. So I was like, Desmond, is it cool if she gets, and sings? And she just went there and belted it out like she owned the place. And so, yeah, she's like that type of person. So I love that about her. But she's got like really cool creative ideas. So I was like, hey, you never know, Shaq. I might be knocking on her door to help me with some music in the future. She's got it.
Do you remember the first time hearing your music on the radio? Was it Porn Star Dancing, or did you get some radio play with your bands before that?
I had radio play with my bands before that. My Darkest Days did as well because they won the Rock Search in St. Catharines. They had, I don't know if you remember that. It was St. Catharines Rock Station, 97.7. They used to have this thing.
It was Every Lie, right? That won that competition?
Yes, it did. Every Lie won that competition. But hearing Porn Star Dancing on the radio, actually, the very first time we heard Porn Star Dancing finished, I think was actually even a cooler moment. We were playing a show in Barrie, Ontario. Again, we were signed, the music was done, but no one knew who we were yet. This was before the music video. We got a show. Oh my God, there was a band. It was Edwin and some of the and
Crash
Jeff
Karma?
from the Tea Party. Crash Karma. We were opening for Crash Karma, and I remember we get to the show in Barrie, and this is this little venue. And I remember when we get there, we get an email, and it's the ludicrous version of the song, and we had not heard it yet. And so we were like, "Oh my God, we gotta listen to this right now." And it was just like Crash Karma was doing a sound check. We waited until I think they were done. We just, when everything was quiet, we play it, and we just hear Ludacris's vocal on this, and we're like, this is going to be crazy. And, you know, fast forward a couple months later, I don't remember hearing it on the radio for the first time. Um, it was kind of like it all just happened at once. It's like when it happened, it was just everywhere in the world that we were in. You know, wherever we were going, if we were touring, you know, we were on the road, we'd always have the rock stations playing on the tour bus. And it's like that what was it was on the radio all the time. So I don't remember the first time hearing it on the radio, but I remember the first time hearing it completed, and it was at that show with Crash Karma.
We've talked about Porn Star Dancing going to number one. The other two singles, Move Your Body and Every Lie, were both top 25 hits on the Billboard mainstream rock charts in the US. You did all these crazy tours throughout your time with My Darkest Days. So there's 3 Days Grace, Default, Theory of a Dead Man, Nickelback, Hinder, Trapped Bush, Seether, Skillet, Papa Roach. When you think to all those amazing bands, are there any stories that come to you that are entertaining or worth sharing, or favorite memories from your time on the road with those bands?
There is so many. I'll tell you, the funnest tours I ever did were with Hinder. Those guys are just hilarious, and we had like an amazing time. Like every time I see Cody, the drummer for Hinder, he doesn't understand why I find this story so funny, but I love this story. They had the guitar player for Hinder, his name was Blower, and he was always known for just doing the craziest things. Like you would go backstage and there'd be like a crowd of people. You're like, what's Blower doing? And you'd see him, and he'd have his nuts hanging out and spraying hairspray on his nuts, and he'd light a match and just and like they would always be something like that was always going on. You would know because you would see their crew run backstage, and sometimes it would be during our sound check before showing. I put down my guitar, but I need to go see what the hell is happening over here. Always crazy stuff. But there was one night we used to spend a lot of time on each other's buses, and I think one night a couple times I rode with Hinder and stayed on their bus, and because we were so communal with each other. And there was one night it was me, Cody, and Blower, and we were sitting in the lounge of the tour bus. And I just asked Blower, I was like, how many we'd have a rider every night, you know, and part of the rider was you could just kind of ask for whatever you want, booze, whatever, wine, food. The promoter had given us so much gum. Like it was an insane, like thousands of pieces of gum. So I said, Blower, what are we gonna do with all this gum? And I was like, let's see how many pieces of gum we could fit in your mouth. And I just kept stuffing little pieces of gum in Blower's mouth till like he looked like a squirrel. I'd never seen such a big wad of gum. But I don't know, it was like stuff like that, like just funny, like kind of innocent things that like that just to keep ourselves occupied. I used to love when we used to tour together with those guys too, and the tour buses used to have to gas up, and we go to like a truck stop at like 2 a.m, and then all the bands just like walk out of the tour buses together, and we would just raid the gas station for snacks and stuff like that, and just be throwing stuff at each other, just stuff like that. Like I love those memories. But I have a memory that of playing. We did some tour dates with Stone Temple Pilots when Scott Weiland was in the band still, and man, I remember seeing those guys play for the first time, and I think that was the very first time I was genuinely starstruck. And mind you, by that point, we had played with way bigger bands than even Stone Temple Pilots were at the time. But there was just something about those guys. I remember them just walking past, and he was out of worldly. Like you would meet like a lot of celebrities, you know, on this journey, and you're like, oh yeah, I know him from so and so. Even if they were big, but there was something about Scott Weiland that was just different. And I vividly remember that him just walking up on stage, walking past him, like, holy shit, it's Scott Weiland. Like,
He was the epitome of a rock star.
Yeah, but he was even so much more than that. It was like he wasn't from this planet. And like I said, like at that point I had already met Slash. I'd met my idols, you know. I didn't get and Slash, obviously I don't want to like downplay Slash is Slash. He's the legend. But there was something about Scott Weiland that was just like, who is this person? Like it's like he's out of this world, you know? So yeah, and I also remember on that tour, there was a night myself, Gavin Rosdale, singer of Bush, and Shim, the singer for Sick Puppies, we were sitting side stage at another show together. We walked on at the same time right before Stone Temple Pilots were playing. I remember all of us just looking at each other being like, damn, They're good. Like they were so good. So the whole band was just insane. Yeah.
When I was 14, I got both my ears pierced and I bleached my hair blonde. And I remember my
Nice.
parents being like, what is happening? And my dad and I did a road trip to New York State and we saw Fishbone open for Stone Temple Pilots, open for Red Hot Chili Peppers, talking about a
Oh,
few bands you love here. And
holy.
when Scott Weiland gets on stage with Stone Temple Pilots,
Yeah.
he's there with, he's like this lizard man rock
Yeah.
star on stage,
Snake.
and he has the bleach blonde hair and he has the
Oh
two
yeah.
earrings. And I go, see, Dad, other people have it. And he's like, this is your example that's supposed to
Yeah.
convince me this lizard looking rock star drug addict slithering around on stage. That's what's supposed to
Yeah.
convince me that normal people do this. I'm like, okay, maybe that
Yeah.
was a bad example.
Yeah. Maybe it was a bad example. Oh man, that would have been a killer show to see. That would have been awesome.
It was awesome and it was super loud. And then at the point where they get off stage and they're preparing to bring out the chili peppers, more speakers drop down from the ceiling. And my dad goes, oh my God, it's going to get
Oh
louder than
god.
Stone Temple Pilots.
Oh my god. That's crazy. No, it's true. Yeah. They were a loud band too. Yeah. I remember that too. That watching them like, holy shit, they're loud.
After you guys released the debut My Darkest Days album, you guys get nominated for a Juno for New Group of the Year. What did that
Mhm.
Juno nomination mean to you? That's Canada's Grammys. That's a big deal.
It was a big deal. I remember there's a funny story to go with that too, if you want to hear that. But we get the nomination. I remember thinking like, wow, like that's pretty crazy. And I will objectively say, and again, I'll be completely objective because like I'm pretty good at being like, we shouldn't have got that. We should have won that Juno. At the time, I believe we ended up losing to a band that sold 5,000 5,000 copies of their album, but they had sold it riding their bikes across the country, which is pretty cool. But at that point, we had kind of gotten gold in the States and platinum in Canada, and we had like there was a part of me that like, and a lot of Canadian musicians will talk about this too. Sometimes there's kind of this when you make it in America, it's almost kind of like you've strayed from your
Canada
home.
holds it against you.
Yeah, and you can there's like there are other Canadian bands that will talk about this. Like if you are just big in Canada, you will get the royal treatment, and we did until we started veering off into America and then spending the majority of our time in America. I felt like how could we have not won that? It was just like we had out of that entire category, we had the most sales across the board, and we were doing some crazy things. So, but the nomination itself was like, wow! I actually have it in my home, like it's the nomination right there because I think that it's like it was so cool to be able to have that. But the funny thing was the way we showed up to the Juno Awards was we had a show in Boise, Idaho, two days before, the day before the Junos, and we were supposed to play the show, get on a flight, fly to Toronto, I think it was, with the Junos that year, and attend the whole ceremony and everything. And the day before, we're in Boise, Idaho, and it's snowing, and I wake up to Matt in my bunk, and I'm on my side. And our bus driver said he saw a deer, which is questionable. We're not really sure if he actually saw a deer or something else happened. And the bus flipped over on the highway, and it landed, thank God, on the side in a huge snowbank. So snow kind of like impacted the flip, and we just slid across, the highway. And I remember seeing Doug fly out of his bunk completely naked. And we had just hired this personal assistant. Her name was Juice. It was like her third day on the job. And Dougie landed on her, spread eagle, completely naked. He got injured. He was limping. So we showed up. Dougie was to the Junos. Dougie had a cane and everything like that. So I remember the Junos mainly because of that incident that happened before. But it was fun, and it was really cool to obviously be like you said, it's the kind of Canadian version of the Grammys. To kind of have that as part of your history was also pretty cool.
Were you more traumatized by the bus crash or by Doug's nude moment?
I would say Doug's nude moment, just because I was like, man, she's not going to come back now. Like it's done. Like, you know, that's it is. But she roughed it out for a little bit longer, so I was grateful for that.
So in 2012, you guys released the follow-up album, Sick and Twisted Affair. So there's two
Mm-hmm.
singles, Casual Sex and Sick and Twisted Affair. Casual Sex is a top 25 hit on the mainstream rock charts in the US for Billboard. And then Sick and Twisted Affair was a top 40 a hit. The album debuts at number 9 in the US on the rock album charts. Did you guys feel a ton of pressure with this album having to follow up the success of the last album and Porn Star Dancing?
Totally. And I think that's what Casual Sex kind of was, but it just wasn't as strong a song overall. But honestly, man, I'll tell you, it didn't really matter. It was like the band, and still, like, if you look at the band's Spotify numbers today, which I didn't today, but if you probably look, we're still averaging over 2 million listeners monthly on Spotify alone. If that band took on a, I don't know, it's just like the fans were going to come out whether we had more hit songs or not. That's what it felt like. People just loved, I think, the folklore again of the band. And we were, as much as we had radio hits, we were also a word of mouth band because we had a lot of fun at our shows. There was a part of the shows where we would bring up as many girls from the audience on stage as possible, to the point where you felt like the stage was going to collapse. So I just think that it didn't even matter if we had more of Porn Star Dancing type hits. People loved being around us. And we noticed that second album, we were bigger than we were on the first album. And we were headlining tours of our own and selling out venues. And it was successful. There was a lot of pressure, though, to write hits, because when you're signed to a major label, that's what it's always all about, right? It's like hits, 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 hits. And I think that's a shame in a way. And that's the hard thing sometimes about being on a label, is there is that pressure, timelines, deadlines. And I think that can kind of hinder the process sometimes. They say you have your whole life to write your first album and then 6 months to write your next, you know? I know Matt probably felt a lot of pressure as well. But we all did, because we all wanted to contribute and we all wanted to do something great. And we didn't want we didn't want it to end, you know? So yeah, there was a lot of pressure for that. But I've also learned from that experience as well, and how to just sometimes say no. You know, I've kind of learned that now. But yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
You had a few heavy hitters that joined in on the album. You had John Five, you had Barry Stock from 3 Days Grace. How did they
Yeah.
become involved in the project?
Honestly, I think John Five, and I could be wrong about this, but I think John Five got into the project through James Michael of 6 a.m. I think that's how John got on. And then I'm playing on one of the songs. And then Barry, we have had such a close relationship with 3 Days Grace, obviously. So that was never like, oh man, I wonder if Barry's gonna play on the song. It's like, it's Barry. He's totally gonna play on the song because he loves us and we love him. And maybe he didn't feel that way, but that's how we felt. He felt about us, kind of thing. So, and Barry's obviously incredible and sweetest person in the world. So, yeah, that's how it kind of came to be with those guys. And then Orianthi, Michael Jackson's guitar player, came on a song called "Set It on Fire." Yeah, we were like collaborative. We loved having kind of different people feature on, and it just kind of broadens your audience a little bit. So yeah, it was cool.
The album featured an awesome cover of Stutter from Joe. When did you guys first start playing that song, and how did you end up choosing that cover to be on the album?
That was like, I think we were doing that cover of Stutter before the first album. It was just, you know, sometimes like after we'd be playing a song, and if it shared a similar chord progression, sometimes Matt would just start singing another song, you know? And Stutter was one of those songs, I think, that kind of came from that, if I can recall. It might have been another hip hop song, because Matt would do that quite a bit. But it just sounded so natural. And when we played that live, people loved it. So we're like, we got to record this. Because even on the first tours that we did, we played Stutter as a cover, and people loved it. So yeah, I think it just became one of those things that we should record that. And actually, it's funny because I don't really listen to My Darkest Days ever anymore. Like I don't go back and listen to the records. But a couple months ago, I was like, I had just like a craving to listen to Stutter. I just loved it. So I was put it on. I was like, oh, this is cool.
You guys had songs in the movie Saw 3D and in the video game
Mm-hmm.
NHL 13. What was it like to experience your music in those mediums?
Man, that is cool. Like yeah, like I said, it's really cool to see your music kind of go different places. Um, but it was like beyond that, even like we'd have, friends, people come up and be like, I heard your song from a video game. And to me, that was wild. It was like, man, not even from the radio, from a video game, you heard this song and now you're at a show. I always thought that was so cool. I remember being in Toronto on a day off again, flew back home and I was with my girlfriend at the time. And I'm like, what's going on in the city today? And she's like, oh, there's like a bodybuilding convention, down the street. So I was like, let's go. So we just kind of go. And the second we walk into the bodybuilding convention, there's like a bunch of girls flexing, doing their thing, and porn star dancing's just blaring through the entire convention center. And I'm just like looking around. I'm like, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. So it's like cool stuff like that. Like you hear a song in different places like that. And a funny one was this was actually a couple of years ago. This is kind of relatively recently. I think it was just like during COVID. My wife was like in the bathtub and she was watching this documentary on Netflix. I can't remember what documentary it is. And it was like it was talking about like how women are portrayed in media and culture and all that stuff. And she was just like, I remember she's watching the documentary. She's like, Sal, this documentary is amazing. You gotta watch. I'm gonna send this to your mother. I'm sending this to your sisters to watch. It's so good. And then she kind of comes out of the bathroom. She's like, you're not gonna fucking believe it. I'm like, what? She's like, they played the porn star dancing music video in this documentary I'm watching in a really negative light. So I'm totally not sending it to your mom and your sisters now. So it'd be funny. You'd see stuff like that as well. But no, we always said like no strippers were harmed in the filming, the making of that music video. Everyone wanted to be there and to be a part of it. So, but anyways, it's cool to see your music in kind of different places, things you've been a part of. Yeah, it's cool. Hockey games, you'd be at a hockey game and Move Your Body would start playing at a Maple Leafs game and you'd be like in the arena like, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
In 2013, it gets announced that you've left My Darkest Days, that you are going to
Yeah.
venture out on your own. You're going to start your own band. At what point did you decide that it was time to leave?
I knew from day one I wasn't going to be there full time. I knew it wouldn't be able to last for me. I loved the music, loved the music. I loved what did on stage together. I loved being in a hit band. I loved, being able to be the guy in that band, like I loved it all. However, I lived a completely different lifestyle. I think that really clashed with, at the time, Matt. And not that how I perceive things or the way I like to live and exist is better than his. It has nothing to do with that at all. But I just think we clashed a lot. And that was hard for me because when you're in a band, you spend more time with your band members than you do your wife or anybody. Like you guys are together 24/7. So there has to be a synergy outside of the music that can carry you through the tours. And I always felt like the odd man out in the band. And I was. And like I said, not because I'm like, putting my nose up at anybody. I'm a different type of person. And I think also a big part of it was they were all from the same town. They were all from Norwood. They all grew up together. They had this, different type of bond and upbringing than I think I did. And so I was the outsider coming in. I was the outsider the entire way through. And at some point, I just looked at everything and I was like, man, like when I set out to do music, I wanted a number one song. I wanted a platinum record. I wanted to be nominated for a Juno. Those were things I wanted when I set out music from high school. And I was like, I achieved all of that. And I said, so now my musical journey has to be about something else, you know? And I wasn't getting the other side of what I needed from the band, the camaraderie. And so I just felt like it was my time to go. And so I ended up leaving the band. And obviously, I don't think Matt was expecting it, and they were upset, obviously. And there was a lot that kind of came from that. You probably saw when I was on my honeymoon, there was like, you know, we were supposed to have like an announcement together that I was leaving and have an official press release. And, you know, they kind of released that we're never getting married. And I don't know, it was distasteful. But again, I don't hold anything against them. It was like such a long time ago, and people grow and whatever. I grew since then. And I can assume that they did too. And I still communicate with the band members as well. So it's like, it's not, you know, I haven't talked to Matt so much in the last handful of years, but Reed will touch base. Dougie will touch base. Brendo once in the blue moon. So I still love them. That's the other thing too. I love those guys. It has nothing to do with that. It was just, you know, there's some people that you can love, but maybe not want to spend a lot of time with, if that makes sense. You know, everyone's grown up since then, so it would be different now. But at that time, that's how I felt. I love you guys, but I need to go.
Well, as an outsider that's looking at it objectively, you could see that there's a few things that are different. You're from a different city, you're younger, you've changed your lifestyle.
Yes.
So it's like not everything is congruent anymore.
Exactly. And that I felt very hard because I started getting to like super like started getting to like holistic living and stuff on those tours. And it was really hard. Like we were, again, like kind of saying, like having to hold up the image. We're this party band endorsed by Jaeger Monster Energy drink, you know, everything that is, and I'm like juicing, you know, before a show, you know, and like, I just found it hard for me to kind of like keep that up. So yeah.